Welcome to Eldros. If you're looking for a quiet vacation spot, you've come to the wrong dimension. Picture a world where history had a major identity crisis and decided to be everything at once. You've got ancient, crumbling ruins that look like they were pulled straight from a history book, except they're humming with leftover magic. Then, right next to them, you might find a grove of crystalline trees that sing when the wind blows. It's the kind of place where you could trip over a 1,000-year-old enchanted sword on your way to a workshop filled with sputtering, steam-powered automatons. It's beautiful, chaotic, and just a little bit crazy. The cities here aren't much different. Imagine a bustling marketplace where vendors sell glowing potions next to stalls hawking spare clockwork parts. Towers of brass and obsidian scrape the sky, connected by rickety rope bridges and whirring cable cars. But for every marvel, there's a shadow. The wilderness is genuinely wild, full of beasts that are part magic, part machine, and all hungry. The forests whisper with the echoes of forgotten spells, and the deserts are littered with the metallic skeletons of long-dead mechanical leviathans. Eldros is a land of stunning contrasts, a beautiful, high-tech magical mess holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. This world wasn't always so jumbled. The old stories, the ones grandmothers tell in hushed tones, speak of a golden age, a time when magic and technology worked together in perfect harmony, creating wonders beyond imagination. But something went wrong. A great cataclysm, they call it. Nobody knows exactly what happened, but it shattered civilizations, scrambled the magic, and left the world scarred. Now, the people of Eldros live among the beautiful, dangerous wreckage of their past, trying to piece together a future from the fragments of what was lost. It's a tough gig, but they're a resilient bunch. And into this glorious, hazardous, and utterly unpredictable world, a new story was about to begin. It wasn't a story about a king or a legendary warrior, at least not at first. No, this story started, as so many good ones do, with a traveling bard with a smart mouth, a mysterious power he barely understood, and a knack for finding trouble. Or maybe trouble had a knack for finding him. In Eldros, it was usually a bit of both. The world was holding its breath, and it was about to exhale his name, Smokey Cerebrum. The town of Cogsworth was having a bad day. A really bad day. Its main gear, the one that powered the whole town's water and steam systems, had been sabotaged. To make matters worse, a gang of scrap metal bandits riding clanking mechanical hounds had decided this was the perfect time to take over. The townsfolk were huddled in their homes, the air thick with fear and the smell of stagnant water. The local tavern, the Rusty Flagon, was quieter than a library during finals week. It was into this delightful atmosphere that Smokey Cerebrum strolled, loot slung over his back, a cheerful grin on his face that was completely out of place. Smokey wasn't your typical hero. He was lanky, with a mop of unruly black hair and eyes that seemed to dance with mischief. He ordered a drink, took a look around at the glum faces, and decided the mood needed a serious upgrade. He hopped onto a table and struck a chord on his lute. It wasn't just any music. His notes seemed to shimmer in the air, weaving between the rafters and chasing away some of the despair. He sang a song about a heroic badger who outsmarted a grumpy mountain troll. It was silly, it was catchy, and for a moment a few people almost smiled. That's when the bandits decided to crash the party. The tavern doors burst open and in stomped their leader, a brute named Grackle with a cogwheel for an eye patch. He and his cronies were there to collect supplies. When Grackle moved toward the barkeep, Smokey did something unexpected. He played a sharp, discordant note. From the shadows in the corner of the room, a tendril of dark, cool fire lashed out, wrapping around Grackle's leg and yanking. The bandit leader went down with a surprised yelp and a loud clang of armor. Everyone stared. Smokey just shrugged. He was off-key, he explained. This was the Shadowflame, a power Smokey didn't fully control but could call upon in a pinch. It was fire that felt like a cool night, a flame born of shadows. He used it with the flair of a stage magician, creating flickering duplicates of himself to confuse the bandits, wrapping their weapons in shadowy tendrils, and generally causing musical mayhem. He didn't just fight them, he put on a show. By the time the town guard finally showed up, the bandits were tied up in a neat, grumbling pile, and Smokey was taking a bow. Cogsworth was safe, and a legend had just begun, whether he wanted one or not. Every good story needs a villain, and Eldros had a doozy. His name was Vather. The tragic part? He used to be one of the good guys, a legendary hero, celebrated in songs and stories for his courage and strength. He was the guy on all the posters, but heroes, like anyone else, can fall. Vather found a cursed sword called Oblivion's Edge. The sword promised him the power to end all conflict, to bring a final, perfect peace to the scarred lands of Eldros. It sounded great on paper. The problem was, the sword's idea of peace was to unmake the world entirely, to erase everything and start over from silent, empty nothingness. Vather, twisted by the sword's dark magic, now believed this was the only way. He He saw the world's pain, its chaos, and its endless cycle of struggle. In his corrupted mind, destroying it was an act of mercy. He began to gather an army of corrupted creatures and lost souls, his power growing with every village that fell to his shadow. A creeping blight followed in his wake, draining the land of its color and magic, leaving behind a gray, lifeless husk. Vathir wasn't just a conqueror, he was a walking apocalypse, convinced he was the world's savior. And honestly, those are the scariest villains of all. Of course, you can't have an apocalypse in the making without a dusty old prophecy to go with it. Tucked away in the archives of the Seer's Conclave was a cryptic verse. It spoke of a time when a fallen hero would seek to silence the world with a blade of sorrow. Cheerful stuff, right? But it also said that hope would lie with a new champion, one who could wield the fire that is not fire, the shadow that gives light, a champion known as the Shadowflame. For years, the Seers had searched for this person, expecting some grim-faced warrior or powerful mage. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected the prophecy to be about a wisecracking bard who used his incredible cosmic power to trip up bandits in a pub. When the elders of Cogsworth heard the story and saw the lingering traces of his cool, dark fire, they put two and two together. They sent word to the Conclave, and suddenly, Smokey Cerebrum went from being a traveling musician to the world's last, best, and most confusing hope. The weight of this destiny was, to put it mildly, a lot to drop on a guy whose biggest plan for the week was to find a town with decent ale. Being the prophesied savior of the world is a lot of pressure. It's definitely not a solo gig. Smokey knew he couldn't face Vathir and his army of gloom with just a lute and some snappy one-liners. He needed a team. His first stop was the floating city of Cogspire, a marvel of whirring gears and steam-powered platforms. There, in a workshop cluttered with half-finished automatons and sparking arcane capacitors, he found Lyra. She was a tech witch, a genius inventor who could coax magic into wires and weave enchantments into circuit boards. With her shock of blue hair perpetually escaping its goggles and grease stains on her cheeks, she was the brains the operation desperately needed. Next, their journey took them to the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, a range of jagged peaks where the air was thin and ancient history was very much alive. Here lived the twins, Kale and Alara. They weren't just dragon riders, they were bonded to their companions Ignis and Zephyr since birth. Kale was the stoic guardian, his connection to the hulking bronze dragon Ignis making him a formidable force in a fight. Alara was the scout, quick and agile like her sleek silver dragon Zephyr. They agreed to help, seeing the blight Vathir was spreading as a threat to the natural, magical world they swore to protect. Their travels then led them to the Sunstone Caldera, a volcanic region where the people had learned to live in harmony with the planet's fiery heart. Here they sought out Reese, a fire dancer. He wasn't a mage in the traditional sense, he didn't cast spells, he moved with them. Fire was his partner in a deadly, beautiful dance. He could summon walls of flame, hurl fireballs, and sculpt embers into shimmering shapes with a flick of his wrist. Reese was a quiet soul, his intensity burning in his eyes, but he saw the darkness in Vathir's shadow and knew that his light was needed to fight it. And so, the team was formed. A bard, a tech witch, dragon-bonded twins, and a fire dancer. They were an odd bunch, a motley collection of misfits from the four corners of Eldros. They had very little in common except for two things. First, they were all ridiculously powerful in their own unique ways. Second, they were all that stood between the world they loved and Vathir's silent gray peace. Their quest was set, their enemy was known, and their journey into the heart of the shadow was about to begin. It was going to be epic. With the team assembled, their grand tour of places you don't want to be began. Their first stop was the Whispering Woods, which sounded quaint but was anything but. The trees were ancient and gnarled, and well, they literally whispered. They whispered your deepest fears, your worst memories, and honestly, some really bad jokes that got stuck in your head for days. The place was haunted by spectral wraiths, leftovers from some ancient magical battle. The team had to rely on Reese's light and Lyra's specially tuned ghost-zapping sonic emitters to navigate the oppressive gloom, all while I tried to out-sing the trees with cheerful shanties. It was a close call, but hey, the shanties won. From the spooky forest, we journeyed to the ruined city of Metallica. Once a shining hub of technological progress, it was now a skeletal graveyard of rusted towers and silent factories. Here, we weren't fighting ghosts, but Vathir's corrupted war machines. These were once helpful automatons, now twisted by his dark magic into relentless, screeching killers with glowing red optics. This was Kale and Alara's time to shine. From the backs of Ignis and Zephyr, they rained down fire and fury, while Lyra worked frantically to hack the machine's command protocols, turning them against each other in a symphony of destructive, chaotic sparks. After surviving the robot apocalypse, we needed to find the sunken archives of Eridor, a legendary library said to hold the secrets to Vathir's weakness. The only problem was that it was, as the name implies, sunken. We had to commission a rickety, magically shielded submersible from a port town inventor who was probably half mad. The journey underwater was a claustrophobic nightmare filled with giant bioluminescent squids and ancient water elementals who were, very grumpy about trespassers. Inside the air-filled dome of the archive, we had to solve ancient puzzles while the whole structure groaned under the immense pressure of the deep sea. Every step of our journey was a test. We climbed treacherous mountain passes where the wind howled like a banshee, and we crossed desolate plains of glass, a scar left over from some forgotten magical war. We fought off sandworms in the shattered desert and outsmarted cunning goblin traders in underground cities. Each challenge pushed us to our limits, forcing us to combine our strange and wonderful abilities in new ways. It was exhausting, terrifying, and sometimes, against all odds, a whole lot of fun. We were becoming more than a team. We were becoming a single, cohesive unit. The journey wasn't all life-or-death battles and haunted landscapes. There were quiet moments in between, moments around a crackling campfire that were just as important as any fight. It was in these moments of calm that the real bonds of friendship were forged. After a long day of, say, not getting eaten by a rust monster, they would gather under the stars. Smokey would pull out his lute, not for a showy battle anthem, but for a soft, quiet melody that spoke of home and hope. The music would hang in the air, a small shield against the vast, dangerous wilderness around them. It was during these nights that they started to share their stories. Lyra, who always seemed so confident and in control, confessed her fear of failing, of her inventions not being good enough to make a difference. Reese spoke of the pressure he felt to control his fire, terrified of the destruction it could cause if he ever lost his focus. Kale and Ilara talked about the immense weight of their bond with the dragons, a connection so deep that they felt the world's pain as if it were their own. They weren't just a collection of powers anymore, they were people, with fears and doubts just like anyone else. Of course, it wasn't all serious. You can't put Smokey Cerebrum in a group without some serious silliness breaking out. He had a bottomless supply of terrible puns that made Kale groan and Lyra roll her eyes, though Ilara always seemed to laugh. They invented running jokes like trying to teach Ignis, the massive bronze dragon, how to play fetch with a boulder. The experiment ended when the boulder landed a little too close to their camp. They held contests to see who could tell the most ridiculous story, a competition Smokey always won, usually by making the whole thing up on the spot. These moments of levity were their anchor. The laughter, the shared meals, the quiet understanding. It all built a foundation of trust that was stronger than any enchanted armor. They learned each other's strengths and covered for each other's weaknesses. Smokey's humor lifted their spirits when they were low. Lyra's logic grounded them when they were lost. Reese's calm centered them, and the twins' unshakable loyalty reminded them what they were fighting for. This friendship, this found family, became their greatest weapon, a light that Vathir's encroaching shadow could never hope to extinguish. While our heroes were busy bonding and battling their way across Eldros, Vathir was not exactly sitting idle and knitting a world's best tyrant sweater. From his fortress atop the jagged peak of Skyren, a place where the sky itself seemed to be fractured, his power was growing exponentially. The cursed sword, Oblivion's edge, fed on his despair and his twisted conviction, and in return, it granted him dominion over shadows and decay. He could feel the world's life force, and he was siphoning it, drawing it into himself like a vortex. The land around Skyren Peak was the first to show the full extent of his influence. What was once a vibrant mountain range was now a desolate wasteland of gray rock and black ice. The trees were petrified, the rivers ran thick with a black, oily sludge, and the air was cold and thin, tasting of ash and sorrow. This blight was spreading, a creeping stain on the map of Eldros. Villages on the edge of this dead zone fell into a deep, hopeless apathy. Their crops withered, their machines rusted, and their magic faded. It was a slow, creeping death, and it was all radiating from Vathir. From his throne of obsidian, Vathir watched Smokey and his companions. He wasn't blind to their progress, he saw them through scrying pools of shadow. He heard of their deeds on the whispers of the corrupted winds, but he didn't see heroes. He saw a delay. He saw a painful, futile struggle against the inevitable. In his warped perspective, they were prolonging the world's suffering. He saw their friendship, their hope, and their laughter not as a strength, but as a foolish denial of the truth. That the world was broken beyond repair and needed to be put out of its misery. He began to send his most powerful lieutenants after them. Nightmare creatures forged from pure shadow and twisted metal, and fallen mages who had willingly given themselves over to his cause. He raised armies of shades from the sites of ancient battles, their numbers swelling with every passing day. Vathir wasn't just waiting for a fight. He was preparing for a war. He was convinced that his path was the only one, a righteous crusade to bring about the ultimate peace. The final confrontation was drawing near, and Vathir, the fallen hero, was ready to erase the world to save it. The climb to Skyren Peak was the final grueling test. The air grew colder, the landscape more twisted and hostile with every step. Vathir's entire army stood between them and the summit fortress. What followed was not just a battle, but a perfect symphony of teamwork. Kael and Alara on their dragons became a storm of fire and wind, punching holes in the enemy lines and taking down monstrous siege beasts. They were the cavalry, the air support, and the awe-inspiring shock troops all rolled into one powerful twin-led force. Their roars echoed through the blighted canyons, a sound of defiance against the encroaching silence. On the ground, Rhys was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. He danced through the hordes of shades, his flames a brilliant searing orange against the oppressive gray. He created walls of fire to protect his friends, incinerated clusters of enemies with graceful, sweeping arcs of his arms, and became a living beacon of light in the heart of the darkness. Beside him, Lyra was the tactical nerve center. Her deployable energy shields deflected volleys of shadowy projectiles. Her shock grenades disabled corrupted automatons, and her quick thinking allowed her to find and exploit weaknesses in the enemy's formations, shouting commands and coordinates to the others. Smokey was the heart of it all. He wasn't the strongest fighter in the traditional sense, but he was the conductor of their orchestra of battle. His music was a weapon and a shield. He played soaring melodies that bolstered his friends' courage, making them faster and stronger. He struck jarring, discordant notes that sowed confusion among the enemy ranks, causing shades to falter and machines to short-circuit. His Shadowflame lashed out in unpredictable ways, disarming elite guards, creating diversions, and clearing a path through the thickest parts of the fighting, always with a defiant grin on his face. Finally, they breached the fortress gates, leaving the remnants of the army to the dragons. Inside the throne room of black ice, Vathir waited. He stood alone, Oblivion's edge pulsing with a hunger that seemed to drink the light from the room. The fight that followed was personal and brutal. Vathir was immensely powerful, his swordsmanship a blur of deadly grace, his dark magic crashing against them like a tidal wave. The team fought as one, Lyra analyzing his attack patterns, Rhys creating openings with blasts of fire, and the twins coordinating flanking attacks. But Vathir was a fallen hero, and he knew how to fight them. One by one he forced them back, until only Smokey stood before him. "You cannot win, boy." Vathir's voice was a dead thing, devoid of all emotion. "This world is dying, I'm simply offering it a painless end." He lunged, his cursed blade aimed at Smokey's heart. Smokey met the attack, not with steel but with a cord from his lute. But this time, something was different. He wasn't just calling on the Shadowflame, he was finally understanding it. The prophecy spoke of a fire that was not fire, a shadow that gives light. It wasn't a weapon of destruction, it was a power of hope, born from the darkest of places. Smokey closed his eyes and let the music flow through him. He didn't sing of battles or glory. He sang of the laughter around the campfire, of Lyra's brilliant mind, of Rhys's quiet strength, of the loyalty of the twins and their dragons. He sang of the small kindnesses he'd seen in towns like Cogsworth, of the resilience of the people of Eldros, of the beauty of a world that was messy and chaotic but still full of life. The Shadowflame erupted from him, but it wasn't dark or cold. It was a cascade of vibrant living shadows filled with the silvery light of a billion stars. The light of the true Shadowflame didn't burn Vathir. It enveloped him. It didn't show him destruction, it showed him what he'd forgotten. It showed him the hero he once was, the people he had saved, the joy and the love he had fought to protect. It showed him the hope he had lost. The cursed sword, Oblivion's edge, could not feed on hope. It shrieked, a terrible soul-tearing sound as the pure, positive energy of the Shadowflame overwhelmed its dark magic. The blade cracked, then shattered into 1,000 pieces of useless black metal, its curse broken forever. Vathir fell to his knees, the dark power leaving him, the life and sorrow returning to his eyes. The wave of light and shadow pulsed outwards from the peak of Skyren, washing over the blighted lands. The gray receded, color seeped back into the world, the petrified trees softened, and the black rivers began to run clear. The sun broke through the fractured clouds for the first time in years. Smokey hadn't destroyed the darkness, he had transformed it. He had shown the world and its fallen hero that even in the deepest shadow you can find the light. Eldros was saved, not by an ending, but by a new beginning inspired by the song of a bard and the enduring power of friendship.